I've never been the jealous type. That's not how I was raised. My dad always said if you have to police someone, you're already losing. And I believe that. Trust was the foundation of any real relationship. Without it, what was the point? But that morning, trust didn't feel like such a sturdy thing anymore. Ashley and I had been living together for almost 4 years. Engaged for 2. Wedding planned for next summer. You'd think we were rock solid by that point, right? Our life had a rhythm. Work, gym, dinner together most nights, Netflix arguments over what to binge. Normal stuff. Comfortable. Maybe even too comfortable. We were sitting at our small kitchen table, the one we bought together at that overpriced vintage store downtown. She was scrolling through her phone, absent-mindedly stirring her coffee with the other hand. I was flipping through the news on my tablet, not really paying attention until her laugh broke the silence. Not a full-on laugh. More like a quiet chuckle to herself. The kind you share with someone when you're in on a private joke. Then her phone buzzed again. Another message. Her smile lingered and her thumb hovered over the screen, typing something quickly. That's when I noticed how she shifted her body just slightly, angling the phone away from me. Like it was an unconscious habit. But it wasn't. It wasn't even subtle. My stomach did this weird little flip. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't trying to invade her space. But it was right there in my line of sight, a notification from someone named Steve Work. Now look, I know most people have 100 random contacts from their jobs. That by itself? Not suspicious. But the thing is, I knew her team. I'd been to their office parties. Watched the World Cup with her boss at a bar once. We even hosted a barbecue with her coworkers last summer. I could name most of them off the top of my head. There had never been a Steve. Trying to keep it casual, I said, "Hey, who's Steve?" She didn't even blink. "Just this breezy, oh he's new. Joined a few weeks ago." Super annoying, always blowing up the group chat with dumb memes. She rolled her eyes for added effect. It was the kind of answer that should have been enough. Normally it would have been. But the way she said it too fast, too rehearsed, landed wrong. And then she did something else. She locked her phone. Screen went black. Placed it face down on the table. That wasn't her usual habit. Ashley was the type to leave her phone open, scrolling through Pinterest boards or shopping carts we both knew she'd never actually buy from. But not today. Today it was face down. Like it was hiding something. I wanted to let it go. God, I wanted to let it go. My rational brain jumped in immediately. "You're being paranoid." She said, "It's a new guy at work. What else do you want? Stop being that guy." So I tried. Went back to my tablet. Scrolled through headlines I didn't actually read. Something about gas prices. Something about a celebrity divorce. None of it registered. Because across the table, my fiancée was sipping her coffee with this faint, lingering smile. And my gut? My gut was telling me something wasn't right. The rest of breakfast was filled with empty chatter. She talked about her project deadlines. I nodded in the right places. On the surface, we were fine. But beneath that surface, something subtle had cracked. A hairline fracture. Invisible to the outside world, but I could feel it growing. After she left for work, I sat at that kitchen table for a long time, just staring at the spot where her phone had been. Trying to convince myself that this was nothing. That Steve Work was just another harmless name in her contacts list. That I was being ridiculous. But the seed had been planted. And deep down, I already knew this was the first crack. You know what the worst part was? It wasn't even what she said. It was how easy it was for her to say it. The casualness of the lie, because, let's be honest, that's what it felt like, stung more than the words themselves. That morning, I learned something about Ashley. She could lie with a smile. And I had no idea when that started. A week passed. A week of pretending that morning hadn't happened. I went through the motions: work, gym, dinner at home. Ashley was her usual self, or at least she was good at acting like it. She laughed at my dumb jokes, asked me about my meetings, even suggested we look at wedding venues over the weekend. If I hadn't been paying attention, I might have believed things were fine. But I was paying attention now. Little things stood out. The way she kept her phone closer than usual. How she started wearing perfume on workdays she normally wouldn't bother for. A few extra minutes spent on her hair even when she was just going to the office. It was subtle. Calculated even. I kept telling myself not to jump to conclusions. One text from a guy named Steve wasn't enough to spiral over. But I'd be lying if I said my gut wasn't twisting more each day. Then Friday rolled around. We were eating dinner, takeout from her favorite Thai place, when she casually mentioned it. Said her team was doing a last-minute dinner with management to celebrate a project launch. Nothing formal. Just a work thing. She'd be home late. I smiled. Nodded. Played the part. But inside, alarms were going off. I didn't push back. What was I supposed to say? No, you can't go to your work dinner because my gut has a bad feeling about Steve? That would have made me the jealous, controlling fiancé. And if I was wrong, I'd be the villain in my own head. So I let her go. She left around 7. Dressed up, not overdressed, but nice. Nicer than usual for a casual work dinner. I watched her through the living room window as she got into her car. She didn't look back. I told myself to let it go. I really tried. But an hour later, I found myself driving. I didn't have a plan. Maybe I was just restless. Maybe I wanted to prove myself wrong, to drive past her office and see the parking lot full, validating her story. Maybe I just needed to see for myself. Instead, my route took me toward the edge of town. Toward the country club. Now, this wasn't some high-profile resort. It was a modest place. Golf course, event hall, restaurant, popular for weddings and corporate retreats. We'd been there once for her company's holiday party. But this night, there were no events on the calendar. I didn't even realize where I was going until I saw her car, parked right out front. And through the large front windows of the clubhouse restaurant, there she was. Ashley. With him. I didn't need a name tag to know it was Steve. The way he leaned in, the casual way his hand rested near hers on the table, it wasn't hard to figure out. They were laughing, sharing some private joke, their heads too close together. This wasn't a group dinner. This wasn't even a work thing. It was a date. And I was watching it happen. I stayed in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't rage. Not yet. It was something slower, heavier, like realizing you've been living in a house with a cracked foundation. She never mentioned this place. Never said a word about meeting here. As much as it hurt, part of me wasn't surprised. I think I had been waiting for this confirmation. Waiting for the universe to slap me with the truth so I'd stop gaslighting myself. I didn't storm in. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I watched. For an hour, I sat there, watching her laugh, watching her tuck her hair behind her ear in that way she did when she was nervous but trying to flirt, watching Steve soak up every minute of it. When she finally stood up, gathering her purse, Steve stood too. He placed a hand on the small of her back as they walked out. Not overly an asterisk mate. Just subtle enough to scream volumes to me. I ducked down slightly in my seat, heart hammering in my chest. She got into her car. Drove off. I sat there for a while longer. This wasn't the part in movies where the betrayed lover charges in and causes a scene. No. This was the part where you sit in your car, alone, and let the weight of it settle on your chest. When I got home, she was already there, casually scrolling through her phone on the couch. She looked up, smiled like nothing had happened. "How was your night?" she asked. "Fine," I said. She told me about the dinner with the team, about how they celebrated a big win and had a few drinks. She even complained about how late it had gotten, thanking me for being so understanding. Every word was polished, practiced. It was like watching someone perform a role they'd been rehearsing for weeks. I didn't confront her. Not that night. I wasn't ready. Or maybe I wanted to see how far she'd go. How deep she'd dig the hole before realizing I was standing there, watching. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. The benefit of the doubt, so freely given before, was gone. If she had nothing to hide, why lie so easily? The truth was obvious now. But I needed more than gut feelings and glimpses through windows. I needed to see it spelled out. Because once you see it written in black and white, there's no going back. That night, lying next to her in bed, I stared at the ceiling while she slept soundly beside me. She looked peaceful, innocent. It was almost impressive how easily she could compartmentalize. But me? I was wide awake. And something told me the real truth was just one unlocked phone away. By the third night, my patience had worn thin. It's funny how quickly a person can slip into a routine of doubt. Every vibration of her phone became a question mark. Every chuckle at a text felt like a silent accusation. She hadn't changed her passcode in years, and yet suddenly her phone was never more than an arm's reach away. Bathroom trips, kitchen runs, even falling asleep, it stayed within clutching distance. But people get comfortable. They slip. That night, after her so-called team dinner cover-up, she fell asleep early. We'd been watching some throwaway sitcom. She was curled up beside me on the couch, blanket half pulled over her, phone still in hand. The glow of the screen cast soft light on her face, but her breathing had slowed. Fast asleep. And the phone? Unlocked. It was right there. For a few minutes I battled with myself. Told myself this was beneath me. That trust is built, not stolen. But trust, as it turned out, was already gone. So I picked up the phone. At first, it was innocent. A glance. Notifications. Group chats from work, memes, harmless chatter. Normal. For a moment I almost felt relief. But then I found it. A private chat. Steve. No parentheses this time. No work suffix to dress it up as professional. Just Steve. I tapped. The conversation history hit me like a brick to the chest. It wasn't explicit. Not in the graphic sense. But the familiarity, the comfort they had in their tone was worse. Inside jokes I'd never heard. Flirtations veiled thinly as work banter. Photos from a private team party that I hadn't been invited to where Steve's arm was unmistakably wrapped around her waist. One message in particular stopped me cold. Steve, last night was amazing. You're dangerous, you know that. And her reply. Ashley, good thing I'm technically still not a bride yet, winking face. That was it. No more guessing. No more wondering if I was the paranoid fiancé reading too much into things. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a choice. I scrolled further. Past the emojis, the late-night memes, the half-hearted work references that barely masked their familiarity. There were messages where she vented about wedding stress and feeling boxed in, and Steve, the ever-supportive ear, playing his role to perfection. It was textbook. I wondered as I sat there with her phone in my hand if Steve had any idea I existed beyond a name. Did she talk about me like a chore? A roadblock? The soon-to-be husband she had to keep sweet while entertaining her little side project? The anger simmered, but it wasn't volcanic. It wasn't an explosion. It was cold. Focused. Because seeing those words, reading her thoughts unfiltered, it was like a curtain had been pulled back. There was no fixing this. No awkward couples therapy session where we'd cry and hold hands and promise to communicate better. She'd made her choice. And now it was my turn. I put the phone down gently. Back where it had been. Her breathing hadn't changed. Peaceful. Content. Like a person without consequence. I couldn't sleep that night. Lying next to her, I kept replaying that single line in my head. Technically still not a bride yet. It was such a simple sentence. Flirty. Carefree. But beneath it, the weight of betrayal pressed down harder than any dramatic confession ever could. By morning, Ashley was her usual self. She hummed while making coffee. Asked if I wanted eggs. Scrolled through her phone with the same casualness, thumbs dancing across the screen. Maybe messaging him. Maybe not. I sat at the kitchen table watching her move around like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because what good would words do? She was already fluent in lying. Every answer would be rehearsed, every excuse polished. And honestly, I didn't want to hear them. What I wanted was clarity. Space to breathe. A way out. That day at work, I wasn't present. Meetings blurred. Emails went unanswered. My mind was trapped back at that kitchen table, scrolling through her messages, feeling each word like a pinprick. You think when you find proof for real, undeniable proof, that it'll give you closure. But it doesn't. It just confirms the sinking feeling you've been trying to bury. And worse, it makes you realize how much of yourself you've invested in a lie. I left work early. Told them I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't entirely untrue. When I got home, Ashley wasn't there. Some errand. Or maybe another meeting with Steve. The specifics didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what I had to do next. For hours, I just sat in our living room, surrounded by the life we'd built. The couch we picked out together. The bookshelf filled with our combined clutter. Framed photos of us on vacations that, looking back, seemed like someone else's memories. All of it felt counterfeit now. By the time Ashley returned, I had already made up my mind. She breezed through the door, humming a tune, grocery bags in hand. Looked up, surprised to see me home early. Hey babe. You okay? You're home so soon. I smiled. And for the first time in days, it wasn't forced. I'm fine, I said. Because I knew what was coming. And so did she. Even if she didn't realize it yet. By the next morning, something inside me had gone quiet. Not the angry kind of quiet. Not the storm brewing, fists clenching, I'm going to burn this place down kind. No, this was a different silence. The kind that comes when you know you've reached the end of the road. When you realize there's nothing left to fix. Ashley had made her choices. Now it was time for me to make mine. I started small. Subtle. I called in a few personal days at work. Told them I had family matters to take care of. No one asked questions. If they noticed the edge in my voice, they were polite enough not to mention it. The next step was securing my finances. You'd be amazed how entwined two lives can get after 4 years together. Joint accounts, shared subscriptions, autopays, emergency contacts, it was all connected. Tied up in this neat little illusion of forever. I spent hours unraveling it all. Click. Unlink. Cancel. Every severed connection felt like a tiny release. A slow untangling from the web I hadn't realized I was stuck in. And with every click, the weight on my chest lessened. There was no grand confrontation. No cinematic blow-up. That wasn't my style. Ashley didn't deserve my anger. She deserved my absence. That night, I packed a single duffel bag. Essentials only. A few changes of clothes. My passport. Important documents. Things that mattered. The rest? She could have it. The apartment, the furniture, the framed memories on the walls. It all belonged to a version of us that no longer existed. But before I left, I wrote her a letter. Not a rant. Not a list of grievances. Just the truth. Clean. Simple. Honest. Ashley, you made your choices. This is mine. I'm not here to argue, accuse, or fight. I'm leaving because I deserve better. Because I refuse to be part of something built on lies. I hope one day you understand that. Me. I placed it on her pillow. Fitting, I thought. The same place where we'd once whispered late-night promises. Now it held my final words to her. By evening, I was on the road. No dramatic farewell. No slamming doors or shouting matches. Just the hum of my car engine and the miles stretching out ahead. My destination? Montana. An old hunting cabin my grandfather had left me years ago. Remote. Quiet. Far from Ashley. Far from Steve. Far from the suffocating weight of betrayal. The drive took hours. Plenty of time to think. I thought about how easily she lied. How smoothly she slipped into her double life. How I'd been so willing to believe her even when the cracks were staring me in the face. But I didn't feel like a fool. Not anymore. Because the truth is, loving someone isn't foolish. Giving someone the benefit of the doubt isn't weak. The betrayal? That's on them. Arriving at the cabin felt like stepping into a different world. No Wi-Fi. No neighbors. Just towering pines and the distant murmur of a stream. The air was crisp, carrying none of the noise that had filled my life for the past few months. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I spent that first night in silence. No TV. No distractions. Just me and the raw, unfiltered reality of it all. I thought I'd feel broken. Shattered even. But what I felt was clarity. Leaving Ashley wasn't an act of defeat. It was survival. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Predictable. Missed calls. Texts. All from her. Where are you? Please, can we talk? I don't understand. You're scaring me. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She wasn't reaching out because she regretted what she'd done. She was reaching out because her safety net had vanished. Because the man she thought would always be there to clean up the mess had finally walked away. And that was the real consequence. I spent the rest of the day chopping firewood, clearing out the cabin, getting my hands dirty. It felt good. Simple. Honest work. No manipulation. No half-truths. Just sweat, effort, and results. By the end of the day, I was exhausted in the best possible way. That night, sitting by the fireplace, I allowed myself to feel it. Not the anger. Not even the betrayal. But the grief. Grief for the life I thought we were building. For the future that now belonged to someone else's version of me. The man she kept as a placeholder until someone more exciting came along. I let it wash over me. Didn't fight it. Because grief is just love's way of saying goodbye. And I was ready to let go. In the end, there was no grand gesture. No revenge plot. No karmic justice delivered at the 11th hour. Just me. Choosing peace. Choosing myself. As the fire crackled, I realized something. I hadn't lost anything. I'd been set free. And for the first time in months, I felt weightless. The first few days at the cabin were strange. Not in a dramatic, life-altering way. Just quiet. Unnervingly quiet. After living with Ashley for so long, you forget how much background noise fills your life. The constant ping of notifications. The casual banter in passing. Even the small, meaningless arguments, who left the dishes, whose turn it was to take out the trash. Life is loud. But here? Just silence. The wind threading through the pines. The occasional crack of branches under deer hooves. The creak of old wood settling beneath me. No Steve. No Ashley. No half-lies coated in polite smiles. Just me. I spent my mornings walking the trails behind the cabin. The air was sharp, biting in that refreshing way that made you feel alive. I didn't bring headphones. No podcasts. No music. Just my thoughts, as uncomfortable as they were. It's funny how your mind replays conversations when you have nothing else to listen to. Ashley's voice echoed in that forest. It's not what you think. You're being paranoid. You know I'd never hurt you. Over and over. Every excuse, every deflection. Except now, out here, without her to interrupt, I could finally answer back. But you did hurt me. And I wasn't paranoid. You chose him. It was cathartic in a weird way, like rehearsing a confrontation that would never happen. A debate where I didn't have to raise my voice to be heard. By midday, I tire myself out. Physically, emotionally. Back at the cabin, I started cutting ties. I wasn't just disappearing from Ashley's life. I was extracting her from mine. Slowly. Surgically. I logged into our shared accounts. Unlinked payment methods. Canceled joint subscriptions. Removed my name from things that had once seemed so permanent. Spotify family plan. Streaming services. That Amazon account we used to share. I even went as far as changing my emergency contact at work. It was freeing. With each click, it felt less like running away and more like reclaiming my space. I didn't hate her. Not really. Hate takes energy. Passion. I didn't have that for her anymore. What I felt was colder. A sort of indifference that had to be earned through deep, personal disappointment. Some people say indifference is worse than hate. I think they're right. At night, I'd sit by the fireplace, a glass of cheap whiskey in hand, watching the flames dance. The cabin had no TV, no distractions, so I had no choice but to sit with myself. It wasn't easy. The quiet forced me to reflect on the version of me that tolerated her little lies because they were easier than conflict. On how quickly we're just friends had morphed into inside jokes, private drinks, and hotel rendezvous. On how much of myself I had chipped away just to maintain an image of a relationship that was already crumbling. But I also thought about what came next. For so long, my future had been tied to Ashley's. Now, for the first time in years, that future was wide open. I didn't need her to define what came next. The weight of that was terrifying, but also exhilarating. One afternoon, maybe 5 days in, I got a call. The screen lit up with her name, Ashley. I stared at it, watched it ring out. No voicemail. She knew better than to leave one. A few minutes later, another buzz. This time, a text. I don't understand what's happening. Please, can we talk? You're scaring me. The irony wasn't lost on me. For weeks, I'd been scared. Scared of the truth. Scared of becoming the cliché, the blindsided fiancé who didn't see it coming. Scared of admitting the person I loved wasn't who I thought she was. Now, the tables had turned, and I didn't feel scared anymore. I didn't respond. Not out of pettiness, but because there was nothing left to say. Every conversation would be another performance. Another chance for her to twist the narrative. I wasn't giving her that stage. The silence spoke louder. Over the next few days, the messages slowed. First, a barrage of questions. Then, shorter, clipped please. Please talk to me. At least tell me where you are. I just want to fix this. But how do you fix something you chose to break? I didn't block her. That would have felt too final. Too reactive. Instead, I let the messages sit. Unanswered. Like unopened letters from a stranger. One night, as I was closing up the cabin, a memory hit me out of nowhere. It was from years ago. Ashley and I on the couch, laughing over some dumb reality show. She'd leaned her head on my shoulder, looked up at me, and said, "Promise me we'll always be like this. No matter what." At the time, I believed her. But promises are easy when things are good. The real test comes when it's inconvenient. When no one's watching. And she'd failed that test spectacularly. But here's what I realized out there, in the cold silence of those pine trees. Her failure wasn't my failure. Her betrayal wasn't my shame to carry. It took me a while to see that. To really feel it. But once I did, the weight lifted. She could spin whatever story she wanted. Tell her friends I'd cracked under wedding pressure. Paint me as distant, cold, uncommunicative. It didn't matter. I knew the truth. And sometimes that's enough. By the end of the week, the cabin no longer felt like an escape. It felt like a reset. A place where I'd come to unravel, but instead found something close to peace. It wasn't happiness. Not yet. But it was the beginning of it. And that was more than I'd hoped for. A week later, I left the cabin. Not because I was running. Not because I needed distraction. But because it was time. You can't rebuild your life in isolation forever. The silence helped me find clarity, but healing needs movement. So I packed my bag, got in my car, and pointed it homeward, though not to the home I'd shared with Ashley. I went back to my hometown in Wyoming. My brother Zach had been bugging me for months to visit. Small town life, simple folks, no one cared who you were trying to impress. To them, I wasn't Ashley's fiancé. I was just Mark, the guy who used to fix fence posts with his dad. The one who left for the city to chase bigger dreams. Zach's place became my shelter. He didn't press me for details. He just offered a cold beer, a spare room, and space to breathe. That was enough. In that quiet town, I started piecing myself back together. I took a job with a local construction firm. Hard work, honest work. The kind where no one cared about office politics, only whether you could swing a hammer straight. And in that simplicity, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Ashley's name stopped echoing in my head. Maybe she was out there spinning her version of the story, telling mutual friends that I bailed when things got serious. Maybe Steve was still playing hero in her inbox. But none of that mattered. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't living in reaction to her lies. I was standing on my own ground again. Rebuilding wasn't glamorous. No dramatic epiphanies. No rebound flings to mask the hurt. Just small, deliberate steps. Every morning I woke up before sunrise, pulled on my work boots, and did something tangible. Built walls. Fixed roofs. Repaired things that could actually be made whole again. There was something poetic in that. The people here didn't know my story. Or if they did, they didn't care. To them, I wasn't a betrayed man, I was just a guy doing his job well. Actions spoke louder than appearances, and that was refreshing. Ashley faded into a distant echo. The life we had built, the wedding we had planned, it all belonged to another version of me. One that no longer existed. Ironically, by leaving before she could sit me down with her polished excuses, I preserved something rare: my dignity. I hadn't begged for explanations. I hadn't fought for scraps of honesty she was never going to offer. I just left. Sometimes that's the loudest statement you can make. And as the dust settled, I realized that betrayal didn't define me. It refined me. In walking away, I didn't lose. I found myself again.